The massive doors of the Galactic Council chambers slid open with a hiss that seemed to echo the dying breath of 1,000 worlds. Inside, representatives from across the galaxy sat in their curved seats, but today the usual political chatter was replaced by terrified whispers and the soft clicking of claws on metal. Ambassador Vextal of the Helix Federation walked slowly to the center platform, his normally pristine blue scales now dull with exhaustion. His 6 eyes, usually bright with intelligence, were clouded with the kind of fear that comes from watching your entire civilization crumble. Behind him, a massive holographic projector hummed to life, casting eerie shadows across the chamber. "Walls, fellow beings of the Galactic Council," Vextal began, his voice cracking like old leather. "I bring news from the Outer Rim territories. News that will change everything we thought we knew about survival." The hologram flickered, then stabilized into a view of space that made several council members gasp in horror. Where the beautiful, spiral arms of the Kepler Nebula once sparkled with inhabited worlds, now there was only darkness. Not the peaceful darkness of empty space, but something far worse, a writhing, consuming void that seemed to devour light itself. 17 systems, Vextal continued, his hands shaking as he manipulated the display. Gone in just one solar cycle, the Helix Federation's oldest colonies, worlds that had stood for 10,000 years, reduced to nothing but floating debris and silence. The image zoomed in, revealing the true horror. Massive ships, each easily the size of Earth's moon, moved through space like mechanical predators. Their black hulls were covered in a chitinous armor that pulsed with sickly green light, and from their undersides hung countless tendrils that reached out to grab anything in their path. Planets, space stations, even asteroids, everything was consumed and converted into more of the terrible machines. "The Void Swarm," whispered Councillor Ythara from her seat in the upper tier, her normally melodious voice famous throughout. The galaxy, for its calming effect during negotiations, now carried a tremor that made everyone else feel even more afraid. The ancient texts spoke of them, but we thought they were just legends. Other council members began talking at once. The insectoid Clixon representative clicked his mandibles rapidly in distress. The crystalline beings from Arcturus hummed in frequencies that hurt to hear. The plant-like Verdani swayed their fronds in what could only be described as plant panic. "Silence!" roared Admiral Krextok, the four-armed military commander who served as the Council's defense coordinator. His warrior species had never known fear in battle, but even his voice carried uncertainty now. "Show us the fleet engagement records." Vextal nodded grimly and changed the holographic display. Now they could see the pride of the Helix Federation, 300 warships, including the massive dreadnought Stellar Pride, moving into formation against the Void Swarm. The alien ships looked like toys compared to the enemy vessels. "Our finest captains, our most advanced weapons, our strongest shields," Vextal narrated, as the battle began to play out. "Watch what happens next." The Void Swarm ships didn't even slow down. Their weapons weren't the traditional energy beams or missile volleys that galactic warfare had used for millennia. Instead, they fired something that looked like liquid darkness, streams of pure entropy that touched the Federation ships and simply unmade them. Not destroyed, not exploded, unmade, as if they had never existed in the first place. But worse was yet to come. When Federation ships tried to retreat, the Void Swarm deployed clouds of smaller drones, each no bigger than a shuttle but moving with terrifying coordination. These swarmed over the remaining ships, and through the grainy footage, the Council, members could see crew members being dragged from their vessels, their bodies changing, becoming part of the machine collective. "By the time our last transmission cut out," Vextal said quietly, "the Void Swarm had grown by 50%. They don't just destroy, they convert everything into more of themselves. Every victory makes them stronger." The chamber fell silent, except for the soft sounds of various species expressing grief in their own ways. Some wept, others made clicking sounds, and the energy beings flickered like dying stars. Councillor Ythara finally spoke what everyone was thinking. "If they continue at this pace, they'll reach the core worlds within 6 months. Our entire civilization will be extinct," finished Admiral Krextok bluntly, "unless we find help from someone crazy enough to fight these things and skilled enough to win." All eyes turned to the empty section of the chamber, seats that had been reserved, but never filled. Everyone knew who they belonged to, but no one liked to talk about it. The Deathworlders, Yathara whispered, as if saying the name too loudly might summon them. The humans from Sol 3. The reaction was immediate. Half the council recoiled in their seats. Humans had a reputation throughout the galaxy, and it wasn't entirely comfortable. They were the species that had looked at a planet where everything was trying to kill them and decided to stay anyway. They were the ones who took their primitive chemical rockets and somehow conquered their entire solar system before most species had invented the wheel. More importantly, they were the ones who fought wars not for territory or resources, but for concepts like freedom and justice, ideas so alien to most galactic civilizations that they seemed almost mystical. "They've never answered our calls before," Admiral Krextok pointed out. "Humans keep to themselves, they trade with us, sure, but they've never gotten involved in galactic politics or military conflicts." "This isn't politics," Vextal replied, his voice gaining strength. "This is survival, and humans have a reputation for being very, very good at surviving impossible situations." The vote was swift and unanimous. Within an hour, the fastest communication array in the galaxy was aimed at the distant Sol system, transmitting a message that would have been unthinkable just days before, a plea for help from the species that the rest of the galaxy both feared and secretly admired. The response came back so quickly that it surprised everyone. No lengthy negotiations, no demands for payment or territory, just a simple message. Ship dispatched. Estimated arrival, 72 standard hours. 72 hours. Later, space above Kepler Station rippled as a vessel dropped out of hyperspace. Every sensor array and telescope in the system focused on the new arrival, and what they saw made absolutely no sense. The ship was huge, nearly a kilometer long, but it wasn't the sleek, predatory warship they had expected. Instead, the Healing. Storm looked like someone had taken a hospital and tried to turn it into a battleship, using spare parts and determination. Its white hull was covered with hastily welded armor plates that didn't match, and weapon mounts that looked like they had been installed by someone reading the manual for the first time. But somehow, despite its cobbled-together appearance, the ship radiated a sense of absolute confidence that made even experienced alien commanders nervous. Captain Taemin Kim's voice crackled over the communication channels, calm and steady, despite the chaos around them. "This is the Healing Storm. We're here to help." The war room of Kepler Station buzzed with tension, thick enough to cut with a plasma blade. Holographic displays showed the approaching Void Swarm fleet like a spreading infection across the star charts, while alien commanders from a dozen different species argued in voices that ranged from deep rumbles to high-pitched squeaks. Fleet. Admiral Thekla dominated the center of the room, his massive frame towering over the tactical table. The Krathari warrior stood nearly 3 meters tall, with 4 muscular arms that ended in claws capable of crushing steel. His species had conquered half their home galaxy through pure military might, and right now, those 4 arms were shaking with barely controlled rage. 72 hours, he bellowed, slamming all 4 fists down on the holographic display so hard that the projectors flickered. 72 hours we waited for the legendary human war machine, and they send us this. The other commanders shifted, uncomfortably in their seats. General Zixara of the Mantis Collective clicked her razor-sharp mandibles in agreement, while Captain Vorthak of the Stellar Navy's remaining dreadnoughts simply stared at the tactical readouts with the expression of someone watching their own funeral. "Their hospital ship," Admiral Thekla continued, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "Not even a proper military vessel. A converted medical frigate with weapon mounts that looked like they were installed by children playing with construction. Toys." The war room's main display showed the Healing Storm in all its jury-rigged glory. To alien eyes accustomed to sleek, purpose-built warships, the human vessel looked like a practical joke. Its white hull was scarred with mismatched armor plating, and the weapon systems appeared to be cobbled together from spare parts and sheer human stubbornness. "Perhaps," suggested Counselor Yathara from her floating platform, "the humans misunderstood our message. Maybe they thought we needed medical assistance rather than military support." Before Admiral Tekla could respond with another roar of frustration, the war room's doors slid open with a soft hiss. The alien commanders turned to see 5 humans enter, and immediately the entire atmosphere in the room changed. Captain. Taemin Kim walked with the kind of quiet confidence that made experienced warriors take notice. He wasn't particularly tall or imposing by human standards, but there was something in his dark eyes that suggested he had seen things that would break lesser minds. His uniform was clean but worn, marked with the kind of stains that came from hands-on work in dangerous situations. Behind him came Dr. Hyjin Park, officially the ship's chief medical officer, but the weapon strapped to her hip told a different story. What looked like a standard medical plasma cutter had been modified in ways that made Admiral Tekla's combat instincts twitch. She carried a medical scanner in one hand and moved with the fluid grace of someone equally comfortable in an operating room or a battlefield. Engineer Dong-wook Lee followed, his tool belt loaded with devices that alien engineers couldn't immediately identify. Some looked like standard repair equipment, but others hummed with energy signatures that suggested they could disassemble a bulkhead as easily as they could fix one. His hands were permanently stained with machine oil and what might have been explosive residue. Lieutenant Commander So-young Choi brought up the rear, and she made the alien military commanders the most nervous of all. Officially listed as the ship's nutritional specialist, she carried herself like a tactical genius, wrapped in the friendly exterior of someone who just wanted to make sure everyone was well fed. Her eyes constantly scanned the room, cataloging exits, weapon positions, and potential cover with the casual efficiency of a born strategist. Communications officer Jin-woo Nam had remained on the ship, but his voice crackled through the room's speakers with the kind of cheerful competence that suggested he could hack alien communication systems while simultaneously ordering lunch. "Captain Kim," Admiral Tekla began, his voice dripping with barely contained fury, "I assume there has been some kind of mistake. We requested military assistance against an existential threat to galactic civilization. We specifically asked for your people's most feared warriors, the Death Dealers who conquered your impossible homeworld." Taemin smiled, and somehow that simple expression made several alien commanders step back unconsciously. "With respect, Admiral, you asked for help. We're here to give it." "Help?" Tekla's 4 arms gestured wildly at the holographic display. "The Void Swarm has destroyed everything we've thrown at them. They convert our own ships and crews into weapons against us. We need firepower, not first aid." Dr. Park had moved to one of the tactical displays and was studying the recorded battle footage with professional interest. Her scanner beeped constantly as she analyzed the enemy vessels, and she murmured to herself in the kind of clinical tone usually reserved for difficult diagnoses. "Fascinating neural pathway configurations," she said, seemingly unaware that the room had gone quiet to listen to her. "The coordination patterns suggest a distributed consciousness with primary nodes in the larger vessels. Jin-woo, can you route the targeting data to my surgical bay?" "Already done, Doc," came the cheerful reply from the ship. "I've also intercepted 17 of their command frequencies. Their encryption is pretty basic once you understand the biological component." "Want me to operate on them?" The alien commanders exchanged glances that mixed confusion with growing unease. There was something deeply unsettling about the way these humans discussed warfare in medical terms, as if they were planning to perform surgery on an entire enemy. Fleet General Zixara clicked her mandibles thoughtfully. "Your species has an unusual approach to military terminology." Engineer Lee looked up from where he had been examining the station's defensive systems. "Not really. We just believe in fixing problems at their source. Sometimes that means repairing things, sometimes it means taking them apart to see how they work. And sometimes," added Lieutenant Commander Choi with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "it means making sure the problem can't hurt anyone else ever again. It's all about proper nutrition. Feed people what they need, starve problems of what they want." Admiral Tekla's frustration boiled over. "This is madness. We're facing an enemy that has consumed entire star systems, and you're talking about medical procedures and meal planning." Captain Kim's expression remained calm, but his voice carried a steel edge that made the room's temperature seem to drop. "Admiral, let me explain something about humans. We don't just fight to win battles, we fight to solve problems. The Void Swarm isn't just an enemy fleet, it's a disease infecting the galaxy. And we're very, very good at treating diseases. D. Main tactical display updated, showing the Void Swarm's current position. Red markers indicated their projected arrival time, less than 8 hours. The enemy will be here soon, Thekla announced, his voice heavy with resignation. Our remaining fleets will attempt to hold the line while civilian transports evacuate the core worlds. Your medical ship should stay in the rear with the hospital vessels where it belongs. Dr. Park looked up from her analysis, and for the first time, the alien commanders saw her smile. It was the kind of smile that surgeons wore when they had just figured out how to save a patient everyone else had given up on. Admiral, Captain Kim said quietly, we'll be wherever we're needed most. And based on what we're seeing here, I think we're going to be needed right in the middle of this fight. Lieutenant Commander Choi was already studying the fleet deployment patterns. Jinwoo, start preparing the special menus. I think our guests are going to be very hungry when they arrive. The alien commanders had no idea what that meant, but something in the humans' tone made them suspect they were about to find out exactly why their species had earned such a terrifying reputation. Throughout the galaxy, the first sign of the Void Swarm's arrival wasn't visual. It was the way space itself seemed to scream. Reality twisted and buckled as hundreds of massive forms punched through the fabric of hyperspace, emerging like nightmares given physical form. The sensor arrays of Kepler Station went haywire, their readings spiking into impossible ranges as the enemy fleet materialized. Admiral Thekla stood frozen in the command center, his forearms gripping the tactical console so hard that the metal began to bend. Through the massive viewport, he could see them coming, a living wall of death stretching across the entire horizon of space. Each Void Swarm vessel was a monument to mechanical horror, their black hulls pulsing with veins of sickly green energy that made looking at them feel like staring into an infected wound. "Mother of the Void," whispered General Zixara, her mandibles clicking rapidly in a pattern that indicated extreme distress among her species. There are so many of them. The defensive fleet had looked impressive just hours before. 200, and 37 ships from 15 different species, representing the finest military technology the galaxy had to offer. Now as the Void Swarm approached, they looked like children's toys floating in a bathtub. All ships battle formation Alpha 7, Admiral Thekla commanded, his voice carrying across the fleet communications. Concentrate fire on the lead. "The vessels! Show them what galactic unity looks like." The opening barrage was spectacular. Plasma cannons, quantum torpedoes, and particle beams lit up the darkness like a fireworks display. For a moment, hope flickered in the hearts of the defenders as their weapons found their targets, lighting up the enemy ships with brilliant explosions. Then the smoke cleared, and the hope died. The Void Swarm ships hadn't even slowed down. Where? The concentrated firepower of dozens of warships should have left burning wreckage. There were only minor scorch marks on the enemy hulls. Worse, the damaged sections were already regenerating, flowing back into perfect condition like liquid. Metal healing itself. "Impossible," breathed Captain Vorthak from his dreadnought. "Our weapons aren't even scratching them." The Void Swarm's response was swift and terrible. The lead ships opened fire with weapons that defied everything the galaxy knew about physics. Instead of energy beams or projectiles, they launched streams of pure entropy, darkness that reached out like hungry tentacles and simply unmade everything they touched. Ships didn't explode when hit by these weapons, they just stopped existing. As if they had never been built in the first place, the defensive line began to crumble immediately. The pride of the Mantis Collective, a battlecruiser that had served for 300 years, was touched by one of the entropy streams and vanished without even leaving debris behind. Its crew of 800 simply ceased to exist. Their final screams cut off mid-transmission, but worse was yet to come. Some ships that weren't immediately destroyed were caught by the Void Swarm's conversion beams, twisted rays of light that transformed everything they touched. Metal became part of the enemy collective, and living beings were changed into something that was no longer truly alive. Through the crackling communications, the defenders could hear their own people screaming as they were turned into mindless drones, their voices becoming part of the Void Swarm's horrible chorus. "All ships fall back to secondary positions," Admiral Tekla ordered, his voice breaking as he watched his fleet dissolve around him. "Repeat, all ships fall back. We cannot hold this line." The retreat was chaos. Ships that had trained together, for years scattered like startled fish, their formations breaking apart as panic took hold. Some vessels collided with each other in their desperation to escape, while others were picked off by the pursuing Void Swarm drones that swarmed through space like mechanical insects. Through all of this chaos, one ship was moving in the wrong direction. The Healing Storm accelerated directly toward the enemy fleet, its white hull gleaming against the darkness like a star diving into a black hole. On the bridge, Captain Tae-min Kim sat calmly in his command chair, watching the tactical displays with the focused attention of a chess master, studying the board. "Kim, what are you doing?" Admiral Tekla's voice crackled through the communications, panic making his words almost incomprehensible. "You're flying directly into them. Pull back immediately." "Our job," came the calm reply from the human captain, as if he were commenting on the weather rather than flying into certain death. In the Healing Storm's medical bay, Dr. Hai-Jin Park was preparing for surgery, but not the kind anyone expected. Her hands moved across control panels that should have been managing patient care, but instead were activating weapon systems that had never appeared in any military manual. "Medical nanobots deployed," she announced over the ship's intercom, beginning treatment of the infected area. What emerged from the human ship looked like a cloud of silver dust, but it moved with deadly purpose. The nanobots, originally designed to repair damaged tissue at the cellular level, had been reprogrammed for a different kind of healing. They swarmed over the nearest Void Swarm vessels like an infectious disease, but instead of causing harm, they began to eat. The enemy's hull armor, which had shrugged off the combined firepower of the Galactic fleet, began to dissolve under the nanobots' assault. But this wasn't random destruction. It was precise, surgical, targeting the specific molecular bonds that held the alien metal together. "Patient is responding to treatment," Dr. Park reported with professional satisfaction, as the first Void Swarm ship began to list to one side, its hull breached in exactly 17 critical locations. Meanwhile, engineer Dong-Wook Lee was launching his own contribution to the battle. From the Healing Storm's maintenance bays came what looked like standard hull repair drones, small spider-like robots designed to fix damaged ship sections, but Lee had made some modifications to their programming. "Repair drones deployed," he announced cheerfully, beginning emergency maintenance on the neighborhood. The drones attached themselves to enemy ships with magnetic clamps and immediately began their work. But instead of repairing damage, they started creating it, systematically dismantling the Void Swarm vessels from the inside out. They cut power conduits, severed control cables, and introduced what Lee called helpful modifications to the enemy's weapon systems. Lieutenant Commander So Young Choi's voice echoed across all communication frequencies, her tone as cheerful as if she were announcing the lunch menu in a school cafeteria. "Dinner is served, everyone. Today's special is Void Swarm, prepared medium rare with a side of explosive seasoning. Bon appetit." The Healing Storm's main weapons came online, and the alien commanders watching from their retreating ships finally understood why the human vessel looked so strange. Those weren't improvised weapon mounts. They were surgical instruments scaled up to starship size. Precision lasers, designed to perform delicate operations on patients, carved through enemy vessels with terrifying accuracy. But unlike the crude weapons of the Galactic fleet, these didn't simply blast holes in their targets. Each shot was calculated, precise, targeting specific systems with the same care a surgeon would use to remove a tumor. "Beautiful work, Doctor," Park murmured as she watched a Void Swarm cruiser shut down piece by piece. "Jin-Woo, mark that one for immediate autopsy. I want to understand how their regeneration systems work." Communications Officer Jin Woo-nam's voice crackled with enthusiasm from the ship's bridge. "Already tagged, Doc. I've also been having a lovely conversation with their command network. Turns out their security protocols are about as sophisticated as a children's toy. I've been giving them some new instructions. They seem very confused about which ships are friends and which are enemies now. The alien commanders watched in stunned silence as the human medical ship waded deeper into the enemy formation, its weapons systematically dismantling void swarm vessels with surgical precision. Where the Galactic Fleet's attacks had been like throwing rocks at a tank, the humans' approach was like performing brain surgery with a scalpel. "This is impossible," Admiral Thekla whispered, his forearms trembling as he watched the tactical display. "They're treating the entire battle like a medical procedure." "Not treating," corrected Captain Vorthak, his voice filled with awe and terror. "Performing. They're performing surgery on the entire enemy fleet." On the healing storm, Captain Kim remained calm as explosions bloomed around his ship. Enemy fire that should have destroyed them was deflected by shields that had been designed to protect patients during radiation therapy, and apparently worked just as well against entropy weapons. "How are we doing, team?" he asked over the intercom. 3. Patients successfully treated, 7 more showing positive response to therapy, Dr. Park replied. "I'm getting some fascinating data on their collective nervous system. We might be able to cure the whole infection if we can identify the primary tumor." "Outstanding," Kim replied. "Continue treatment. We have a lot of patients who need our help." The alien commanders realized they were witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history, a species that had turned healing into the most effective form of warfare anyone had ever seen. The battle had been raging for 6 brutal hours, and space around Kepler Station looked like a graveyard of broken dreams. Twisted metal from destroyed ships drifted through the void, while emergency beacons from damaged vessels blinked desperately in the darkness. The once proud Galactic Fleet had been reduced to scattered groups of survivors, hiding behind asteroids and debris fields, too terrified to engage the enemy directly. But through it all, one ship continued to push forward like a white angel of death, diving into hell itself. The healing storm moved through the chaos with purpose that bordered on the supernatural. Enemy fire that should have vaporized the converted medical frigate seemed to bend around it, absorbed by shields that glowed with the soft blue light of medical equipment pushed far beyond its original design. Explosions bloomed around the human vessel like deadly flowers, but somehow it kept flying deeper into the heart of the void swarm formation. On the bridge of his retreating flagship, Admiral Thekla stared at the tactical display with 4 eyes wide in disbelief. "How are they doing this?" he muttered, his massive frame hunched over the sensor readings. Their ship should have been destroyed hours ago. Counselor Yathara floated beside him on her gravity platform, her normally calm demeanor cracked by the impossibility of what they were witnessing. "The humans," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the bridge's emergency alarms. "They fight like nothing we've ever seen. They're not trying to win a battle. They're trying to save everyone. The truth of her words became clear as they watched the healing storm's movements. Where other ships fled from the void swarm, the human vessel seemed to be following a pattern that made no tactical sense, until you realized they were moving from one group of trapped survivors to another, like a rescue ship in a storm. On the human ship's bridge, Captain Taemin Kim stood behind his command chair, his hands resting on the back like a doctor leaning over an operating table. His eyes moved constantly between the various displays, tracking dozens of variables with the same focused attention he had once used during natural disaster responses back on Earth. "Jinwoo, how many survivors in Sector 7? He asked, his voice carrying the same calm tone he had used when coordinating earthquake rescues in Seoul. Communications Officer Jinwoo Nam's fingers flew over his console, his equipment tracking life signs through the chaos of battle. 43 ships with life signs, Captain, all trapped behind enemy lines. The Void Swarm has them surrounded, but they're not attacking. Looks like they're trying to convert the crews instead of destroying them." Kim nodded grimly. The enemy's conversion process was slow, which meant there was still time to save those people. "Dongwook, can you get us there?" Engineer Dongwook Lee looked up from his jury-rigged control station, where he had somehow managed to turn maintenance protocols into weapons of war. His face was streaked with grease, and his hands moved over controls that sparked with each Excuse, but his grin was pure confidence. "Give me 2 minutes to repair that Void Swarm mothership blocking our path," he replied, his fingers already dancing over weapon controls that hummed with barely contained energy. "I've been wanting to perform some aggressive maintenance on that particular patient." The targeted Void Swarm vessel was massive, easily the size of a small moon, its black hull covered in the organic-looking armor that pulsed with evil green light. As Lee's repair drones swarmed over its surface, the alien ship began to shudder, like a patient going into shock. Explosions bloomed along its hull as critical systems were systematically dismantled by machines that were supposed to fix things, not break them. Meanwhile, Dr. Hai-Jin Park had been hunched over her analysis station for hours, her medical scanner working overtime to understand the enemy's biological and technological systems. Suddenly she looked up with the expression of a doctor who had just found the cause of a patient's illness. "I've identified their weakness," she announced, her voice cutting through the bridge noise. "The Void Swarm operates on a networked consciousness. Each ship is like a cell in a larger organism, all connected to a central nervous system." Captain Kim turned to face her, recognizing the tone she used when she had figured out how to save a patient everyone had given up on. "Meaning?" "We saved the patient by removing the cancer," Dr. Park replied, pointing to the largest Void Swarm vessel on the tactical display. "That mothership isn't just their flagship, it's their brain. If we can perform surgery on their central processor, we can cut the connection that keeps them coordinated. And if we cut that connection..." Park's smile was the kind that surgeons wore when they were about to attempt something that had never been done before. "The individual ships will lose their collective intelligence. They'll become confused, disoriented. Like cancer cells when you cut off their blood supply, they'll start attacking each other instead of us." Kim studied the massive enemy vessel, calculating distances and approach vectors. "How close do we need to get for the operation?" "Close enough to inject nanobots directly into their central processing core." "Which means..." Park paused, checking her readings again. "We need to get inside their shields and perform surgery on a moon-sized patient while it's trying to kill us." The bridge fell silent, except for the hum of equipment and the distant sounds of battle. What Dr. Park was suggesting was either brilliant or completely insane, possibly both. "Dong-wook can the ship handle that kind of approach?" Kim asked. The engineer looked up from his controls with the expression of someone who had just been asked to perform the impossible and was already figuring out how to do it. "Captain, this ship was built to save lives in the middle of disasters. I think charging into the mouth of hell to perform emergency surgery on a giant alien brain qualifies as exactly what we're designed for." Lieutenant Commander So Young-choi's voice crackled over the intercom from her position in the tactical center. "All departments, prepare for close-range dining experience. Today's main course is extra spicy and may bite back." The Tertis C1 Healing Storm changed course dramatically, diving toward the largest Void Swarm vessel like a missile aimed at the heart of darkness. The enemy response was immediate and overwhelming. Every weapon on the mothership turned toward the approaching human vessel, filling space with energy blasts that could have melted continents. But the human ship's shields held. The medical-grade force fields, originally designed to protect patients during the most dangerous radiation treatments, absorbed punishment that would have destroyed any normal warship. The energy meant to heal was now being used to survive the ultimate test. "Beginning the procedure," Dr. Park announced as she targeted the enemy mothership's core. Her voice was steady, professional, like she was about to remove an appendix rather than attempt to lobotomize a weapon of galactic destruction. From the healing storm's medical bays came clouds of nanobots, but these weren't the healing machines. They had been designed to be. Park had reprogrammed them with one specific purpose: find the Void Swarm's central nervous system and perform the most precise surgery in galactic history. The nanobots penetrated the enemy ship's hull like microscopic scalpels flowing through corridors and access tubes until they reached the mothership's core. There, in a chamber the size of a city, they found what they were looking for: a massive organic computer that pulsed with the collective thoughts of the entire Void Swarm fleet. The effect was immediate and terrifying. As the nanobots began their work, disconnecting neural pathways and severing the links that bound the fleet together, the entire Void Swarm armada began to convulse. Ships that had moved in perfect formation suddenly veered off course, their coordination shattered. The collective consciousness that had made them so dangerous was fracturing into chaos. Individual Void Swarm vessels, no longer connected to the hive mind, began to panic. Without their shared intelligence, they couldn't tell friend from enemy. Ships that had fought together for eons suddenly opened fire on each other, their confused individual minds seeing threats everywhere. "Patient is responding to treatment," Dr. Park reported with professional satisfaction as she watched the enemy fleet tear itself apart. The surgery was successful. Recommend immediate evacuation of the area before the patient's death throes become dangerous. But Captain Kim was already thinking about the next step. "Jinwoo, how are those survivors in Sector 7? "Still alive, Captain, and the Void Swarm ships that had them trapped are now too busy fighting each other to bother. With conversion protocols." Kim smiled with the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. "Then let's go collect our patients. We have a lot of healing left to do." The aftermath of the battle looked like the universe itself had suffered a nervous breakdown. Where once the Void Swarm had moved with the terrifying precision of a single mind, now hundreds of their ships scattered across space, like confused animals fleeing a forest fire. Some fled toward the galactic rim, others dove toward black holes, and many simply sat motionless in space, their crew minds too fractured to remember how to function. It was the most chaotic retreat in recorded galactic history, and it was beautiful. Admiral Thekla stood on the bridge of his damaged flagship, watching the enemy fleet tear itself apart through his four eyes that could barely believe what they were seeing. Void Swarm vessels that had worked together for millennia were now firing on each other, their shared consciousness so thoroughly broken that they couldn't tell ally from enemy. "By the Void," he whispered, his massive frame trembling with exhaustion and wonder. "The humans actually did it. They broke the unbreakable." But while the alien commanders celebrated their unexpected victory, the crew of the Healing Storm was already moving on to the next phase of their mission. Captain Taemin Kim had never seen a battle as something to be won or lost. He saw it as a massive medical emergency, and there were still patients who needed help. "Jinwoo, scan for life signs throughout the battlefield," Kim ordered, his voice carrying the same calm authority he had used during hospital emergencies. "I want every survivor located and tagged for pickup." "Already on it, Captain," came the cheerful reply. "I'm reading life signs from 67 vessels, including some very confused Void Swarm drones. Their neural patterns are all over the place. Looks like they're having individual thoughts for the first time in their existence." Dr. Hai-Jin Park looked up from her medical station with interest. "Bring them aboard, all of them." The alien commanders who were monitoring the human communications could hardly believe what they were hearing. Admiral Thekla activated his comm system urgently. "Captain Kim, surely you're not planning to take Void Swarm prisoners aboard your ship? They're the enemy." Kim's response was patient but firm. "Admiral, they're patients, and we don't abandon patients, no matter who they used to be." Over the next several hours, the Healing Storm moved through the battlefield like a rescue ship after a hurricane. Damaged alien vessels were taken in tow, their injured crews transferred to the human ship's expanded medical bays. But most, shocking of all, the humans also collected the Void Swarm drones that had been left behind when their mothership's consciousness collapsed. Dr. Park worked tirelessly in her medical bay, which had been transformed into something part hospital, part laboratory and part miracle workshop. Alien crew members with injuries that their own species considered fatal were walking around within hours, treated with human medical techniques that seemed to work on every known form of life. But it was her work with the Void Swarm drones that truly stunned the galactic observers. "We've isolated the collective virus," Dr. Park explained to the assembled alien commanders who had been invited aboard to witness her work. She stood beside a medical table where a Void Swarm drone lay unconscious, its black chitinous armor open to reveal biological components that pulsed with individual life. "These beings weren't evil," she continued, her scanner showing neural patterns that looked almost familiar. "They were infected by a technological parasite that suppressed their individual consciousness and forced them into a collective mind. With proper treatment, we can restore their original personalities. General Zixara clicked her mandibles in disbelief. You're telling us that the Void Swarm, the terror of the galaxy, were actually victims? The parasite was the real enemy, Dr. Park confirmed. These drones are just people who had their minds stolen from them. People we can save. As if to prove her point, the drone on the table stirred, its compound eyes opening for the first time in centuries with individual awareness. When it spoke, its voice was weak but unmistakably personal, no longer the monotone chorus of the collective. Where am I? It asked in a language that hadn't been heard in 1,000 years. I remember my name. My name is Kethsol. The galactic commanders who witnessed this moment would later say it changed their understanding of what it meant to be truly civilized. 3 weeks later, Captain Kim stood before the full Galactic Council in their great chamber, his medical crew arranged behind him like soldiers who had won a war through healing rather than killing. The assembled representatives from across the galaxy looked at these humans with a mixture of awe, gratitude, and healthy fear. "You asked for warriors," Kim said, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. "But you needed healers. Sometimes the most powerful weapon is the refusal to let anyone die on your watch, even your enemies." Councillor Yithara leaned forward in her floating seat. "Captain, your methods were unconventional. You treated warfare like medical practice." Kim smiled. "Because that's what it was. The galaxy was sick, infected by something that turned living beings into weapons. We didn't cure the disease by destroying the patients. We cured it by removing the infection and letting the patients heal." Engineer Dongwook Lee was already working with alien technicians throughout the station, teaching them his philosophy of aggressive maintenance. His lessons were practical and immediate: how to convert civilian vessels into medical military hybrids, how to turn repair tools into defensive weapons, how to make sure that help could always reach those who needed it. "It's not about the weapons," he explained to a group of fascinated alien engineers. "It's about the will to protect what matters. Any tool can be a weapon if you're creative enough, and any weapon can be a tool if you remember what you're really fighting for." Lieutenant Commander So Young Choi had set up what she called a nutrition station in the station's main plaza, distributing her specially prepared combat rations to anyone who was interested. The packages looked like simple meal kits, but alien military analysts quickly realized they contained everything needed for extended survival operations: medical supplies, emergency equipment, and yes, in a pinch, the components for improvised explosives. "Food is love," she explained to a group of bemused alien officers, her smile warm and terrifying at the same time. "And sometimes love means making sure the people trying to hurt your family can't do it anymore." The healing storm remained in the sector for 3 months, and those months transformed the entire region. The human crew established field hospitals on worlds that had been damaged by the Void Swarm attack. But these weren't ordinary medical facilities. They were training centers where local populations learned what the humans called emergency medical procedures. These procedures happened to include combat tactics, defensive strategies, and the fine art of turning medical equipment into weapons when necessary. Alien doctors learned how to use medical scanners to detect enemy infiltration, how to convert surgical tools into defensive weapons, and most importantly, how to turn hospital ships into mobile fortresses that could protect and heal at the same time. The transformation was remarkable. Within weeks, the core worlds had a network of medical facilities that could also serve as military strongpoints, staffed by doctors who could perform surgery with one hand while operating a plasma rifle with the other. As the healing storm prepared to leave for their next assignment, Ambassador Vextel approached Captain Kim one final time. The blue-scaled diplomat looked older than his years, but there was a peace in his 6 eyes that hadn't been there before. "Your people," he said quietly. "They're not what we expected when we called for help." Kim's smile was gentle but carried the weight of absolute conviction. "We're exactly what you needed, Ambassador. The galaxy called for help and we answered. We always will." The human ship departed quietly, slipping into hyperspace with the same understated confidence it had shown throughout the crisis. But they left behind something unprecedented in galactic history, a network of trained medical military personnel who understood the human philosophy that healing and protecting were the same thing. The Void Swarm never returned to civilized space. Some say they're still out there in the dark between stars, but their collective consciousness remains permanently fractured. More importantly, the individual drones that were saved have become some of the galaxy's most effective teachers, sharing their recovered memories to help others understand the danger of losing individual identity. And throughout the core worlds, a new saying emerged that made people smile nervously whenever they heard it. When the humans ask if you need a doctor, pray you never find out what the prescription is. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. Sometimes the most terrifying warriors are the ones who fight not to destroy, but to heal. And sometimes, the greatest act of healing requires the complete destruction of everything that threatens your patience. The end.